Welcome back to another episode of A Little Jaded. This is Kelly, and I'm currently joined with my co-host Joanna and another member of our team, Viv. And we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, reminiscing on the 4 years since the COVID-19 pandemic took over the world and created a worldwide shutdown, and how it has impacted music, fans, and the music industry.
Yeah. Oh, hey guys. I'm really excited for this topic because I feel like it just everything that is happening now, the way press is done, for example, the way tours are happening, like social media, it's all been affected. Everybody's careers, everybody's jobs were all affected by the pandemic and everything switching to being online. So I'm really interested to talk about it. Um, I feel like a good place to start would be what does everybody remember from that time, March 2020, and maybe, tickets that you guys had for things that were coming up, plans that you guys had, and how that all kind of changed.
Yeah, I specifically remember a lot of it was just a big build-up. Um, I remember March 13th, I wasn't supposed to, wasn't having classes on on Fridays. And then right after that was supposed to be my spring break. So I was supposed to have like a 2 week spring break. And I was just excited to like chill. And I didn't think that it would be longer than 2, 3 weeks at most, or like even a month. But I never expected it to like trickle into April or May. And so I had like I don't think I had many concerts lined up. I think I only had like Harry Styles' Love on Tour in June. It was like the end of June. And I was like, "Oh, it's not gonna be touched. Like it'll be okay. It'll be okay." And then roll around to June 30th to 2020. I remember that like everything was canceled. It was such a disappointing time. But yeah, Viv.
Same. It was me and my best friends were like on a hike when we got like the little text alert, like lockdown is happening, and we're like in the mountains, like, oh, we're fine. Like it's like a 2 week break. We'll just like reassess. It was my last year of college, and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And my only worries were like how you had like Love on Tour tickets. I had BTS tickets. I also had 5 Seconds of Summer tickets. I was like, those won't be touched. 2 weeks, I'm gonna sleep. I'm gonna do the work that I haven't done. And then suddenly it's like, your last year of college is gonna be online. Everything's online. I didn't know what to do. But we made it out 4 years later.
It's crazy to think about, like how you said you were in your last year of college. I was at community college, and I feel like COVID and like that shutdown, it kind of forced us all to sit and think like, okay, what do we want to do? Because you were already in that position, but you were doing something completely different than what you're doing now. And
Mhm.
it kind of opened up this a lot of different opportunities in a weird way.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's weird to think about like where I was at that time. 'Cause I wasn't even working in music. I was at community college. I I remember it was Friday the 13th, like even that I was like, oh, this is weird, like this is crazy that this is happening.
Mhm.
And I didn't think it was going to change things as much as they did, but at that time I remember I think I had just bought tickets for 5 Seconds this summer because I had just kind of entered my era where I was becoming a really big fan, and obviously anybody who knows me knows I love them now. But I even now still have like a ticket stub from what was supposed to be the No Shame tour, the No Shame
Oh.
2020 tour. That's a relic. Like that didn't even happen.
Yeah.
So it's crazy how, like, even just thinking from like the artist's perspective, they're like, this is
Mhm.
temporary. All these things are still gonna happen. We're still gonna go on tour. And then all of a sudden, it's not happening. What do we do to what do we do to move on? Like all of their careers were kind of put at a standstill. All of our lives were kind of put at a standstill. Nobody really knew what to do. It was just confusion in the air. And at first it was excitement, but then it was like, oh, we need to kind of figure everything out. What are we supposed to do? So that kind of goes into something that we really wanted to talk about was how press, like promotions for albums, all of that changed. And like a specific person that we were talking about when we were planning this episode was Niall Horn, for example. Literally released his album the day of the worldwide closure. He released Heartbreak Weather. Great album, but that brings up the question, was it overshadowed? Did this hinder the success of that project, and did it hinder the success of other projects that were coming up after that, like Calm by 5 Seconds of Summer, Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa, and so many others.
Right. And I was thinking more so like also uh just like experiencing all of that new music in such an unprecedented time. What a phrase. We've all heard too many times. But
Mhm.
yeah, I remember specifically also with Niall's album, and it was at that moment where like it started to snowball, where everyone was like, okay, yeah, like I think we're gonna shut down. I think we're gonna shut down. And it was like I was supposed to hang out with a friend on March 13th to listen to the album together. And then my mother, because I was 17 at the time, she was like, absolutely not. You're not going to hang out with a friend. COVID is rampant. I was really depressed about it. So I remember that day vividly just lying down in bed all day, listening to that album on repeat. And you know what? The crazy thing is like that album was was such a staple in my March 2020 that like I can't go back and listen to it because it reminds me so much of that period of time. Um, and I think that's really unfortunate for the Nile stands.
I know. I like going back to like the question of like, do we think it like hindered how well it could have done? I think yes and no, because I feel like in Kelly's experience, like I also was the same, like listening to like Calm and listening to like Heartbreak Weather like on repeat just because like those were my sources of serotonin because I
Hmm.
couldn't go outside. It kind of did like up their stream count. Like if it's like think of like all the Nile fans and all the Five Sauce fans like just streaming it because that's our only source. So it did kind of like give them more sprint like, but I feel like because of all the big news, like nobody was focused on quite literally anything except for what the news said about this is when we're gonna be able to go outside, or this is the next step, or like the last thing I guess on like real life people's worries and not fangirls worries were like what's happening. There was no room for them in the media to promote anything. But then I think like because of like TikTok that just like popped up out of nowhere during COVID, that gave them like a good little leeway of we're not going to make press headlines, but we can somehow make our like they're already celebrities, but going viral again kind of did help. And it did give them, I think, new fans and a new audience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the yes and the no, like was it successful, was it not? It's an interesting conversation because like I also remember I had a lot of time on my hands. That's when I really dove into Five Sauce and their discography, and
Hmm.
that's when a lot of people who like me were like skeptics of TikTok and were like, no, I don't want to download TikTok. They just decided because what else were we supposed to do with our time?
Hmm.
And that, like you were saying, like opened them up to different audiences because like Stan Twitter, Stan TikTok, Instagram, all of that, it's always been going, but especially when everyone has so much time in their hands, everyone's making content, everybody's, experimenting and listening to new music. So, in a way, it did give them some more success because there's more, I think they had a little bit more reach in that way, but
Hmm.
also in the more traditional side of media, they're like traditional press tours with, going on talk shows and, news features and article features and magazines. All of that was taken by COVID. That was like the prime thing that was happening. Um, so people had to transition into the non-traditional way of like, how can I promote this in a non-traditional way? And that's where, the Twitch streaming started happening, the YouTube streaming, people streaming on, Instagram Live and TikTok Live, like all of that really started to get bigger. because they were like, we need to interact with these people in some way. We need to feed them in some way and like try to promote this as best as we can because everything that they had planned just got thrown out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think also with Five Sauce specifically, I mean, I was active on like Stan Twitter prior to 2020, and also on TikTok as well. So I definitely saw like a massive shift in like numbers. Definitely like I'm talking little communities growing like crazy in a matter of like a few weeks. Um, and I think it's also a testament to like being able to work with what little you have, and what little they had was just who they were and the music they wanted to put out. And like I think that's what made them shine and what actually helped them um in the like cycle, because they were putting out like the carpool, what was it?
Karaoke.
Yeah, okay, carpool karaoke. Like they were putting out like a bunch of different things, like the Twitch streams and stuff like that, that honestly deviated from promoting their own music, but just promoted themselves. And I think that's
Right.
what really got them like a lot bigger than necessarily what they were before. Because I know they had a lot of acclaim with Youngblood, like their third album, but with Calm, it was like a complete different sound. So a bunch of different people were coming in from a bunch of different places, and I thought that was also an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm. I think what also was interesting is like, because like I also was like on Stan Twitter and Stan Instagram before COVID happened. And like it's also niche. Like we have our own like little community, but
Mhm.
because of like access to like Twitch and like TikTok and like everybody like turning to that, and like at that time of like COVID, everyone and their mom was on both platforms. It gave them like, okay, it's not just our little community on Twitter anymore. It's the entire world seeing these like, who are these guys? Like, or who are these like people going being silly on the internet? I like them. I'm gonna follow them. And oh, they have music too, is also
Right.
like so interesting. And then going off of that is like same with like BTS is like they've been big for like a while, but they were never big with the general public. Like everyone knows like a K-pop stan and like the K-pop community, but because of like COVID, they were kind of forced to like pivot and like put themselves more online than usual because K-pop has their own little like live stream app. It's not like an Instagram app or like anything. Mo Most people wouldn't know about that.
Mhm.
And so them like pivoting to like stuff that the main general public uses is, I feel like it made them even bigger. Like they've charted on Billboard for the first time because of the like new fans that they had. And I saw like people going, no, like we have to gatekeep them. They're getting too big. And I'm like, but this is a good thing. This is a great thing. And it's like crazy how like unconventional it was to like shift out of like the dynamic of we're only going to use our certain apps that our fans know about to let's just put ourselves on Instagram or like
Right.
put ourselves on TikTok.
That was
Right.
so me, like gatekeep.
Gatekeep.
Get away.
Everyone wants to gatekeep their artists and keep them indie forever, but it's not.
Right.
But it's
Like,
also like, it's like Viv was saying, like it's such a great thing, but it's almost like that made me think about with Five Sauce, with Com specifically. I feel like now, like the people who joined in the fandom in that year where nothing was really happening, because this happened March 2020, very early on in the year. Everything got canceled. Everything was, everyone was home for pretty much like a year and a half because everything only started opening and tours kind of started coming back and getting reannounced mid 2021. Like
right.
that's kind of when everything started happening. And even then, everything was still masked up. Everything was still like there were so many different limitations, it was just different. But I feel like because all of this like ongoing content was happening and everyone was on social media, it's almost like a delayed response was happening. With Com specifically, I feel like months later, people were like, this album deserved more. Same thing with Heartbreak Weather. People love to say this album deserved more because so many fans discovered these projects, not
Right.
when it was released in March, but months later. It was like a delayed thing.
Hmm.
Like when you look at Calm, it was their first, it was the band's first album that didn't reach #1 on the US charts.
I
Crazy
was on
because,
Twitter for that. That was insane.
Me
yeah,
too.
like, because at that time, it was still, they still just had their niche community. It
Right.
hadn't broadened out yet to
Hmm.
what it is now. And like thinking about how, it had some of their biggest songs on there, like Easier and Teeth, and so many other amazing, like underrated songs on there, like Wildflower and like so many others. Uh,
Hmm.
that it was their first album to not reach #1 is insane.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And like speaking to what you were saying, another example that comes to mind is Conan Gray's first album, Kid Crow, came out. I think it was like a week before Calm, and it was like the week between Heartbreak Weather and Calm. I could be wrong. And like it was such a niche community online because he was still relatively small, like under a million probably followers. And it didn't necessarily gain any attention until like later on when like Heather, for example, started trending on TikTok, um, which completely like changed the trajectory of his entire career because that completely put him on the map compared to his other music. Um, and that also reminds me of like how TikTok in general has influenced like not just Five Sauce, not just Nile, not just Conan, but like a completely different rise in so many different smaller artists and a complete like transformation of music in general.
Yeah, I feel like it goes into what we want to talk about, like the TikTok effect, how that affected the music industry, how that affected like ongoing releases at that time, and then now how people release music like currently, because they were completely different. Like now when a new song is coming out, most of the time you cannot escape the snippets on TikTok because they love to release it. They love to build hype on TikTok, on social media. And before then, I can't even remember what it was like. Like it's almost like that was a different world of like music releases back in the day versus how it is now, because now it's just all encompassing. We cannot escape the content.
Hmm.
And it made me think of like I discovered Conan Gray specifically because of his songs that were used for TikTok trends, like Wish You Were Sober and Heather. And that's when I was like, oh, this is interesting. Both of these songs are the same artist. This is cool. I discovered him. I became a fan. But it's the delayed reaction because like Wish You Were Sober, for example, was a song that had been out for months before it went viral on TikTok. Same thing with Heather. Um, Smaller artists like that. And even thinking about that one song that's viral right now from the guy from Stranger Things,
Oh,
that
End of
Yes.
Beginning by Joe. Love that
yes,
song.
even thinking about that, like that was released back in like 18 or something crazy like that. And it's just now getting viral. Like the delayed
Yeah.
effect is still ongoing.
Kind of crazy because like how much older that song was because I was listening to Joe like a few years back too, and that was because of TikTok because I found like a really niche video that was like here's all the music that's released by the Stranger Things cast. And I was like, "Oh, let me check that out." And I was having fun. Um and that's just really interesting about how like TikTok has completely transformed music in general, and I think we've like spoken a lot about that already in the past.
No, I agree. Like what Joanna said, like she was like, I don't even remember what it's like how it
Yeah.
was. Like I genuinely don't because I feel like it's now like a mixture of like new releases, but also like old releases. Like we're bringing back things that aren't necessarily old, but like when they came out, they didn't get the traction. Like it's a like we keep saying it, like a delayed response to things. Because I remember like trying to remember like back then I would like anticipate a new album, but I would wait for it and like wait for it and then like
Yeah.
the hype would kind of die until like 2 days before the release when they would like post something again and you're like, oh my God, like it's happening. And then now it's just like everything is so in your face. New or old, it's like, here's a little short, here's a TikTok, here's a reel, here's a poster. I'm like, I can't keep up anymore, but also like I don't know what's new and what's old anymore because it's just all like meshing together into
Mhm.
like one big like, okay, I just found a new song I like and I'm just gonna go down the rabbit hole now. And then realizing it's not even a song that's out yet. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
That's the
tangent. I
worst.
I hate when I see a song that I like and they're like coming in a month. And I'm like, I can't wait that long. Because we're
Right.
so, like sometimes it's like an old release. Like I'm like, oh, this has been out. I'm late to the game. I'm
No,
like,
I need to mention something about that because during the pandemic, I think it was like 2021, I can't remember the year, but there was one video about this guy who found a CD or like, I don't know, like a tape or I don't know what, from his dad who had like a band in the 70s or something. And they never released any music. So then he starts playing the song in
I
you know what I'm
remember
talking
this.
about?
I
Yeah.
remember this.
And it got like millions of views. And then when it came out, like it they were asking like, "Oh, would you guys wait if we released it or whatever?" And I still followed this guy because I wanted that song. And you could see like throughout the weeks, like or even months before it got released, how much the interest kept dropping. And that's just also because of like how so much gets oversaturated in TikTok. Like you post something and then people forget about it and it disappears. Can I just say that song is still a banger? It's called I don't remember what it's called, but it's like I'll find it one day, but it's still a
It
good song.
is, yeah. No, like everything, I say like the beginning of the pandemic when like TikTok was like popping off for the first time and everything, it was easy for artists to like blow up. Like Conan Gray, for example, like he blew up and he stayed up there.
Mhm.
But
Right.
like as like time progressed, like now it's kind of like I guess the main like quote unquote the main source, like TikTok's the main source of press for everybody right now. It's just so oversaturated. And like I
Yeah.
think it's been like I feel like we all got COVID brain a little, like the little brain rot be happening from TikTok, where like
Yeah.
all of us want that instant gratification of if I'm listening to this song right now, it better be out. But then it's not. And then that's what makes it hard. Cause like I see some artists like they'll test the song and then they'll drop it 2 days later and they're successful. But then there's artists that are like, it'll be out in a month.
Mhm.
And you never see them on your For You page again. Like there's this one singer, her name's Emerald Osegi. I don't know if I'm saying the last name right. She had a song that just like I was like, why are you attacking me right now on TikTok? Like perfect song for the moment. She had like I think like 2.3 million views on that one, like where she dropped it. And then it took her like 2 months to release it. And like
Mhm.
I went and checked and like the streams are really low and I got really sad, but she's a great singer and it's just I feel like TikTok's made it easier but also so much harder for
Yeah.
people to pop off.
Yeah. I feel like there's so much to go into with this whole thing. I mean, I know we did an episode like almost 2 years ago, I feel like, about
Mhm.
the TikTok and the music industry and how it affected it. But I
Yeah.
feel like, first of all, one thing that I wanted to say before I forget was when you were talking about like TikTok running our brains, I feel like because everybody's main source of entertainment and content was TikTok, and before that it was YouTube, before that it was the long form. People could not like get enough of the long form YouTube content. And then short form really started rising and everyone's attention span started going down. And I think that's what really affected the music industry and affected all these releases. I think they
Yes.
I think what you were saying, like everyone's attention spans are a lot shorter and we don't want to wait 2 months for this release. Like if you're shoving it in my face right now, it better be out.
Hmm.
And so it's a weird, like, okay, you got this traction. How are you going to maintain it moving
Hmm.
forward? Because there
Yeah.
are so many songs that really popped off in like the peak of the pandemic by artists like Bene and Gail and stuff, like the ABCDEFU song that really popped off, but what happens after that? And there were
Yeah.
so many songs that were created for the purpose of blowing up. Great. How do
Mhm.
you maintain that? And how do you, like, from that, actually create a career for yourself?
Hmm.
Can I just say that so if you don't know me, uh I started off with Jaded by managing social media. It's just really f ironic because right now I'm trying to cleanse social media from my entire life. I only go on it when I need to. It's been at least 2 weeks since I've opened TikTok. Uh,
Wow.
lot of effort, a lot of work went into that. Um, so like I'm not always up to date with trends nowadays, but I've found more joy and more gratification when watching long form videos now. So like for example, like I come back and I watch like a YouTube channel that they post like 40 to 1 hour videos like a day. And I'm there. I'm tuned in and I'm there and I'm sitting through them all and I'm enjoying it.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's such a like a lost art.
No,
Because
I
you hear so many people, like, it's so irrelevant to what we're talking about, but you hear so many people who, like, can't sit through movies anymore because it's too long. And by too long, I'm not even talking like 2 hours. Like, some people can't sit through a 90-minute movie. And I'm like, what's going on? But that's also a testament to, like, how much, COVID affected us. Like, our productivity, our, like, mental capacity. And it's ironic because I was talking about this in my class today, how there's like studies done where our memory is getting so much weaker ever since the pandemic because we're not exercising our brains enough. We're like more reliant on like the instant gratification. We're more reliant on just like using ChatGPT or like AI to like answer our questions as opposed to like critically thinking. Um, so that's an interesting topic for another day, but thought I'd
Yeah.
bring that up.
what's crazy is you said you haven't been on TikTok for 2 weeks, and so you're not up to date with the trends. But like I remember like before COVID, like trends would last months
Yeah,
at a time. And now it's like there's a new trend every day that you can't keep up with. Like there's a new artist trending every week. And like you can kind of see it affects the charts a little because it's like one day this person's at the top, and then 2 days later when they do the next chart, or like 2 weeks later when they do the next chart, it's like a completely different artist that sometimes I've never even heard of.
right. And you
And
have to
like,
be on that side too of like the
yeah.
of the trend because otherwise you're like, Who is this person and why are they trending?"
Mhm. And
Right.
like everything moves so fast now that sometimes it's hard just to like keep up. And I feel like as somebody who would consider themselves as like chronically online, sometimes I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like you were saying, the oversaturation. Like, there's just too much being thrown at you all the time. Um, there were two things that I wanted to say. First of all, I wanted to say I feel like an artist that really used her social media, like fame and um like having all those viral moments to her advantage, and like has really maintained a career and is like still going to, like, still at the beginning of her career at the same time, as Tate McRae.
Yes.
Like,
Right.
because she is so young, she understands what people want to see from her. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I love Greedy, but for a while I was tired of it. Before the song even came out, I was tired of it because I was like, okay, I've
Mhm.
heard it too much. I feel like I've heard the whole
Yeah.
song and I haven't even heard it yet. But at the same time, look at where she is now. And she's still only really at the beginning of her career. Like, she still only released her second full-length album.
Mhm.
Like,
It's kind of crazy that she blew up this year because I've known of her for at least 4 years.
Yeah.
I think she was gonna open for Shawn Mendes like 4 years ago or like 5 years ago or
Yes.
something, which I
Yeah.
didn't go to, but or maybe it was 2 years ago. I don't know. But yeah, like I've heard of her for a while and no one outside of like I guess the online sphere was really talking about her. And like even the mainstream girlies who love like top of the charts people, like they didn't know who she was. And like no offense to these people, but like that's what like that's how niche she was, and then like how she worked her way through like the social media aspect to like completely blow up in the last
Mhm.
few months or whatever.
Going off of what Joanna was saying, like I think on the opposite spectrum, someone who's a little older, like you guys know Max, the
Yeah.
singer.
Yes.
He like was a YouTube guy,
Mhm.
like then he like disappeared for a little bit and then suddenly I see him on TikTok again. And I feel like because he grew up in that, or like not grew up, started in that like YouTube space, I feel like he somehow figured out how to understand TikTok because I feel like he's gotten so much traction. And like there's this one song, Stupid in Love, that I keep hearing on TikTok and I'm like, I haven't even heard, same as Joanna, like I haven't even heard it yet. It's not even released and I'm sick of it. But it's like in a good way because he's gotten so much attention. So I feel like it's like if you started in the social media space, like all the YouTube singers that never really made it got their second chance to like
Yeah.
bump themselves up. Because I see some people that I saw on YouTube like when I was like maybe 10 or 12, and like after YouTube like became oversaturated, they kind of fell off. And then TikTok gave them that like Tori Kelly's back out there, like Max is back out there. Who
Right.
else? AJ Raphael is like doing his thing. And I'm like, that's so crazy that you guys kind of like got the chance to rebrand and like
Yeah.
boost your career even like further than you did before.
Yeah. It's funny that you said the word, like you said rebrand, because literally on the topic of Tay McRae, what I was going to say is I feel like it's like figuring out what your brand is, what like whatever it is like people see you for or whatever, and running with it. Because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
Tay McRae, for example, people were like, she's the new Britney Spears, and I feel like she really just like saw this aesthetic that people loved for her and she really just ran with it. And
Yeah.
now like even just like her Instagram content is so like pop star, like main character pop girl. I feel like she just leaned into that
Mm-hmm.
and now people see her as this mainstream pop girl. And
Yeah.
with Max, I feel like for a while, and he said this before too, I've been a Max fan since like 2012. I've known of him for so long. So seeing him like finally getting his flowers is super exciting because he's been in the game for years.
I
Like
know.
it's crazy. But I feel like for him, he said like people knew him really well for, his acting, Nickelodeon, Rags, all of that stuff. And he really tried to stray away from it and tried to rebrand himself as something different. And I think people weren't vibing with that. I feel like people could sense that he felt almost like I don't want to be associated with my past anymore. And because of TikTok, people love the nostalgia. People love to resurface movies and different things. Um, so I feel like he saw like people were like, "Oh, you're the rags guy." And he was like, "You know what? I am the rags guy." And
Mm-hmm.
he started leaning into that and like posting about it on TikTok and he added those songs to his set list and people were like, "Well, I want to go to his show if he's going to sing this song." He started doing that and then he started slowly gaining traction from that and just really leaned into the TikTok scene and just leaned into what people wanted to see from him. And I feel like besides when he released Lights Down Low, like in 2016 or something. I feel like
That's
now
the
he's
song
like
I
I had
knew. Sorry. There
yeah,
was one
yeah,
song I knew of him from a while ago, and I didn't know what the name was, and I've been trying to think about it for the last like 10 minutes.
yeah.
Sorry.
Like that was a big moment for him when he was kind of solidifying his solo career. I feel like he had never kind of gone bigger than that, bigger than he had gone with Lights Down Low. Even when he collabed with Suga from BTS, I feel like he still wasn't reaching that level.
Yeah.
I feel like he's finally at that level now
Mm-hmm.
ever since like embracing TikTok and embracing what like just online culture.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like branching off of that, like I like for Five Sauce, going back to Five Sauce, like they started as like openers for One Direction, and I feel like a lot of people expected them to be the next One Direction, which is why I think like personally as a Five Sauce fan, I think they should have blown up immediately, but I think because they were kind of overshadowed by how big One Direction was, they never got to hit that peak in like 2014, 2015. And
Yeah.
then they took their little break, they came back, they topped the charts, and then Calm comes out and it's COVID. And it didn't give them the opportunity, but I feel like going off the topic of rebrand, it allowed them to like put themselves in a different space of like, we're not the pop punk alt boy almost One Direction group anymore. We're Five Sauce. And
Yeah.
this is like it gave them the chance to like rebrand and like spill all the tea that they had and like kind of grow. And people were able to like kind of detach them from One Direction. Like, of course, there's still people that are like, oh my God, like I found you because of One Direction, but it gave the people that found them because of One Direction to like get to know them. RIP. It's just because One Direction's not here, but like it gave them that chance. And I was like, that's what I really liked about like having TikTok as like that new window of opportunity. Because I was like, now people actually get to know the people that like I feel like we've known for a while in like a different way and like separate them from like the pre-existing like persona that they had.
It's interesting that you say that because I was like heavily on One Direction TikTok in 2020 because it was their 10-year anniversary, and a lot of people who would
Yes.
say like either getting into them or anything like that, they were also like reminiscing on Five Sauce, and they were
Mm.
thinking back to like the experiences they had at shows in 2014, 2015, or like being like, oh, like you guys remember this band, whatever. But they were also leaning towards that like 2014 era and not necessarily their new music. And I remember even like when they were back on tour last summer, a lot of people were going to their shows just because they were like, oh, like I remember liking them when they were opening for One Direction. And then
Mm.
they go to the show and they're like, oh, these guys are so cool. Their music is so great. And I'm like, yeah, where have you been? But anyway, um, but yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it because I think that a lot of their casual listeners still associate them with One Direction. And I mean
Mm-hmm.
like a specific demographic. Like I don't mean everyone.
Yeah.
I still think they're relatively like still relatively like unknown in a sense. Because if you ever play
Really?
Youngblood for anyone, they're like, that's them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know how many times I had to explain this to my parents? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
There's there's so much to be said, I feel like, about like like Viv, where you were saying how they were like, they're trying to rebrand themselves. They're trying to be like, we're not this, we're this. But I feel like weirdly, they were at that point where they were like, we're a different group. This is who we are. But they've also leaned into the nostalgia still. I
Yes.
feel like
Yeah.
now they've gone to, it's similar to Max, where they've gone to a place where they're like, okay, TikTok and COVID really let people sit and really let people like go back and rediscover things. And that's why, like, for me, for example, I went back and rediscovered Five Sauce from like back in the day because they did change their sound and maybe, they were at a different place. And it gave me the opportunity to go back and rediscover them. It gave me the opportunity to go back and rediscover a lot of other people. And people were just so nostalgic. And companies and artists have really just leaned into that. And
Mhm.
those are the most successful things. Like, for example, Taylor Swift with the Eras tour.
Oh my
Right.
God,
All the
yes.
nostalgia, like even like if you don't listen to Taylor now, but if you're a big fan of her back in the day with You Belong With Me, like the Fearless era, that brings you nostalgia.
Sure.
That gives people enough of a reason to go to her show. Same thing with Kelly, where you were saying about like, oh, I used to listen to them back in the day with One Direction. Um, but artists who aren't afraid to lean in to
Yeah.
that nostalgia and that fun and that like youthful side of them are the ones that are like continuously growing. Because like with Five Sauce with their
Oh
uh
my God,
Dice
yes.
the
Oh,
Price
Yeah.
song, like they even said in their new tour documentary where they were talking about the Five Sauce show tour, which was the most recent tour, they said like for a while they were almost ashamed of their old sound. They were straying away from it so much so that I feel like that it almost alienated the fans who were a fan of that because they're like, well, that's my favorite song, and you don't want to play it, then that hurts my feelings, type of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like they just decided like it's all for fun, and if this is what they want to hear, let's play into it. Let's have a
Mhm.
little fun. The fact that they had "Don't Stop" on the set list.
It's crazy.
The fact that
No,
they
like,
had Heartbreak Girl on the dice in
Yes.
general,
Yes.
like
Like
that
the
was
fact that
crazy.
they were like, for the longest time, I feel like they were so like, we're above that. We don't
yeah.
want
Yeah.
that, which is fine. Creatively, they are leaps and bounds past where they were with Heartbreak Girl. But at the same
Hmm.
time, like, it's the nostalgia.
Yeah.
I feel like they were like, okay, this is what the fans want. We're going to give it to them.
Hmm.
And this tour, like, they went from playing, theaters on the Take My Hand tour to playing Madison Square Garden in the Forum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That jump in a year
it's
is
crazy.
insane.
No, I agree. Because like I remember like Take My Hamster was like still kind of COVID. Like I was like when I was working that show, like we were still wearing our mask and like making sure it was at the Palladium. It was small.
Mhm.
And I remember like a fan wanted them to sing Voodoo Doll.
Hmm.
And Michael was like, if you pay me $5, I will. Because they were still at that point of like,
Oh my
we
God.
don't want to play that. Like, we don't want to do that. But I thought, and the fan actually gave him $5 and they did it. Granted, it was just like at the Q&A sound check, but then seeing them do like their most recent tour of like having like when I saw the dice, I was shocked. I was like, they grew. Like they learned this is how we can grow and continue to grow as if we just lean into it a little bit because they were so in the like redeveloping and detaching mode that I feel like when they did take my hand, because it was like kind of like the first time that they saw us since COVID started,
Mhm.
it was like a little reminder of like the nostalgia is what helps. And then skyrocket, like
Yeah.
from the Palladium to the Forum, crazy.
Yeah. And I
Crazy.
feel like it helps because like I see people online who are like, oh my God, like I haven't listened to 5 Seconds of Summer since like 2015 when they were making like the pop punk stuff because that's what people knew them as. And then maybe when they changed their sound, people were like, maybe it's
Mhm.
not for me. But leaning a little bit into like their old sound while still letting people, discover their new stuff is what keeps people going
Yes.
because obviously if you were a fan of them from the pop punk stuff and then they go to like their more like pop rock like stuff, the jump
Mhm.
between Sounds Good Feels Good and Young Blood, like they are very different albums. So I can
Yeah.
understand why people were
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't know if I want this. But letting people like what they like but then introduce them to the new stuff, I feel like is really smart. And
Mhm.
it's allowing people to grow with them.
Yes. No, I agree. And like on the topic of kind of like leaning into like what helps your like their career grow is like BTS has never had a song in all English ever. And they already had enough popularity without their English songs. And then like COVID happened and they couldn't go on tour. They couldn't literally do anything. And they're in South Korea, so they couldn't even like do anything in the US to promote them on the Western side of things. And I feel like they leaned into the like, let's just give them an all pop, all English song that will just kind of be annoying and top the charts. And that's what they did with like Dynamite. And like they dropped
Mhm.
like Dynamite. I was so sick of that song. I heard it in Old Navy, I heard it in an elevator,
Uh,
but it was the song that put them on the map like permanently. Like you would see like, I don't know, CNN talk about it. And I'm like, why are they on the news? But
yeah.
it's because they leaned into like, okay, if we can't do this with the fans that we have already, let's just lean into what the people want and like give them a song that everybody can understand, quote unquote.
Hmm.
And then it did so well. And then they released another song in all English and they were on the Grammys for the first time. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's crazy. Like even if it's like as an artist, it's like something that you don't really want to do because it's not who you are anymore or like who you want to be, it just would help. Like it helps a lot. And like we've seen it with like Five Sauce and we've seen it with BTS and like with Tate McRae and like so many other people that it's kind of like crazy how people like rely on like nostalgia or like just kind of feeding into like public opinions just a little bit because it gives you like a stabilized career as an artist.
Yeah, I think a good balance is what needs to be found, of like
Yeah.
what is it that my fans want, but where am I with, what I want to create? How can I kind of blend the two? And how
Hmm.
can I, keep going as an artist? Because obviously at the end of the day, just because you're successful doesn't necessarily mean anything, or quote
Yeah.
unquote
Yeah.
successful. But, you know, I feel like not being afraid to play around, I feel like is what opens more people up to the idea of you
Mhm.
as an artist or as a band or
Yeah.
whatever. But I wanted to, on the topic of BTS, I know something that we really wanted to talk about was the birth of like live streamed concerts, like kind of like the variety show concerts and shows
Yes.
that people were doing online. Um, and Viv, I know that you were saying that like BTS had done one and it was crazy.
Yeah, because I remember like everybody was so like for every tour in general, everybody was so upset that like, you know, you're looking at your little Ticketmaster queue of like shows you have for the year and you're like, these are pointless now. And
Hmm.
I think like one smart thing that BTS did was like they pivoted and was like, well, we already have a platform. It's called Weverse. Like we already have an app that we use to interact with our fans. Let's put the show that we were gonna do on tour, let's put it online. And they sold tickets. I think they were like $40 for like a ticket. And it's like so much cheaper than like an actual concert ticket. And I was like, I don't know if I want to buy this. It's a concert online. Like, how good can it be? Like,
Hmm.
crazy. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm already sad that I don't get to see them. So I'm just gonna buy this ticket and see what happens. And it was their Map of the Soul. They did two. They did one that was called like Bang Bang Con, and then one that was like the actual tour, like Map of the Soul 7. And the first time I saw like it online is they had like the option to like you can view different angles of the stage or different, and it was like they rented out the entire stadium in Seoul, built the
Wow.
entire stage. They were just broadcasting it, and they had like little screens on the floor for like the fans that were watching on live stream to
Hmm.
like act like the audience. And I was like,
That's
this
so
is so
cute.
it's so cute and it's so cool. And it's like I was thinking they would just be on like one stage and like a camera would be there. And I'm like, but it was still like a full scale, like immersive. Like they had the stage set, they had the outfits, they did the set list, and like over like a million people were watching and like from like 200 different countries. And I was just like, that's so crazy because then I started seeing other artists do like live stream concerts because they saw how well it worked. And like obviously it's not the same as like being in person, but for the time, like while COVID was happening, I think it was like a really smart move on their part because you would see people like it would make headlines like online concerts are the new thing. Like this is the new way to promote your album, promote your show, promote who you are. And I think the way they did it just made it feel like you were kind of there in a way because like they
Yeah.
could see you on the little screen and you could see them on the screen. And then like after the show, they would do a live stream talking about how like we wish you guys were actually there in person. Like we wish we could hear like the screams and everything. And I'm like, that's so smart. Like that's so cute. Like now I'm even more emotional. And like I feel like it made me want to like wait on it and like continue to be a fan until they came back.
Um,
Yeah. I think there's so much to be said about the whole concert things and the live stream thing. First of all, I didn't know I didn't tune in personally to the BTS live stream, but that is crazy how much attention to detail went into it.
Yeah.
Um, like that's so innovative of them. And also, I feel like a big reason for the birth of these like live stream concerts were, first of all, a lot of people, I feel like it's very 50-50 on like how much of the general public knows this and who doesn't, but a big like chunk of an artist's revenue is going on tour and selling
Yeah.
concert tickets.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's like 75% of their earnings. I was reading about that like
yeah,
earlier today that like the majority of their earnings comes from that, especially in the digital age where everything's streaming. They kind of make next to nothing per stream. So it's like a- completely getting rid of like the touring industry in general has like completely transformed how artists gain revenue, especially like during that era. So like seeing the complete shift to so many different artists and bands doing paid like live streamed shows or like concerts and things like that is such an innovative way, like you were saying, to not only like connect with fans but also like from a business standpoint to like gain some more pocket change, you know?
and another like another way that tours and concerts and festivals even like benefit artists is, say, you get an ad on your Instagram that says like this tour is coming near you, or you get a notification on, Spotify or whatever streaming platform you use. Like even if you really only listen to a couple songs, oftentimes you'll get these things recommended. Like Five Sauce as an example, when I was kind of rediscovering them for the first time, end of 2019, so before the pandemic happened, I had rediscovered them with Teeth. And when I saw that they had the No Shame World Tour announced and I saw that they had a new album coming out, I was like telling my friend, like, oh, wouldn't it be silly if we went to go see 5 Seconds this summer? Like, I haven't listened to them in years. I don't know any of their new songs, but like, we should just go for fun. And that's how a lot of artists, bring in new fans, is people going in
Yeah.
because they only know the big songs. They only know a couple of songs, and they lost that ability to bring in new people.
Right.
So they're like, okay, now we have to do double time. We have to go on social media and we have to think like what's another way that we can grow our presence and grow our fan bases. So touring is such an important thing. Even when you're at a festival and you're passing by a stage and you hear a song that you kind of recognize, or you hear a song that you've never heard before, but you're like, oh, I want to go check it out. That's another potential fan that they're potentially gaining. So they lost all of those potential fans. So I feel like a lot that kind of gets pushed under the rug a lot, but like how beneficial, like how insanely beneficial like concerts, touring, festivals are. Um,
Hmm.
and I wanted to list off, because we had a list of some tours that got canceled due to the pandemic. 'Cause there were so many that everyone, to this day, people are like, man, I wish that this had happened. Obviously, there was the Map of the Soul World Tour by BTS, Nice to Meet You tour by Niall Horan, the No Shame tour by Five Sauce, the Where Do We Go tour, Billie Eilish. Taylor Swift was supposed to have a whole like festival tour thing with a
Loverfest,
Lover
yeah.
album, which
Oh,
happened. Um, the Future Nostalgia tour, Dua Lipa, and like so many other artists had to cancel their tours because at that point, the time of the shutdown just kept getting extended and extended, and we're like, well, we don't know when this is gonna, like, when is this actually gonna happen for us? They canceled. Some people didn't cancel and they just rebranded the tours, and fans got to keep a hold of their tickets. Um, and I know we were saying before, like fans got like, if you had a ticket to this tour, you get a pre-sale code or something.
yeah. I
They do
was
that
so
for
upset.
Loverfest too, I think.
Yes, I think for the Eras tour, if you had Loverfest tickets, you had like guaranteed like a ability to like buy tickets or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, even though it's so hard for touring, like even touring managers, I would say, because also countries just had different restrictions. For example, like I'm in Canada, and all the Canadian Harry Styles Love on Tour dates got canceled while the US ones were still going, and I'm still mad about it 3 years later.
As you should be.
Yeah, you know what? But yeah, I was gonna say how like the touring, I was gonna go back to what you were saying earlier of like the touring aspect also brought in more fans, but also for smaller artists specifically, because people like I don't know about you, but for I guess bigger artists, it's a little more expensive, so you're probably not going to bring in many newer fans. But smaller artists, it's kind of like, oh, it's like $30 a ticket. I'll just go. I know two songs. And I've definitely like honed in on that in the last couple of years ever since the pandemic. And like even openers for smaller artists, like that's
Yeah.
how they create their own audience in general and their own like fans in general. I remember I was at a concert like in October and I was listening to the opener and I was like, I really like this girl. And mind you, like we were less than 300 people in this audience. And then she played her final song and I'm like, "Oh my God, I know this song." And she has like less than a million stream like monthly listeners on Spotify. I was like, it's so crazy how, smaller artists will still gain a lot more of an audience afterwards when they're going on tour. And I definitely like jumped into all of her music afterwards. But yeah, what I was gonna say is that like a lot of the times we kind of overlook like how much it also affects smaller artists who are just
Yeah.
going on tour to like make themselves known.
Hmm.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, even the people who open for like the bigger artists, like one of the
Yeah.
big things that or one of the big artists that I can think of right now who's like really popping off is Chapel Roan and
Right.
her
Yeah.
opening for Olivia for the Sour tour and now also opening for the Guts tour. I feel like she's also kind of had this like steady build at like increasing.
Same with Gracie Abrams. She was the one who
Yeah.
opened for
And
Olivia in the US, I think. Um, but yeah, I was gonna say also for Chapel Roan, like I remember being pitched her like at like a press conference back in September or something, and I couldn't go and I didn't know who she was, and I was like, ah. But now I've gotten so much more into her music in the last I don't know how many weeks or months. And I regret not going to that press conference now because she's such a cool person. But yeah. But it's definitely like a thing where a lot of the times if your openers are also known in the same sphere, like in the same like if you have the same demographic of fans, even if it's a smaller subsect of like that demographic, it's such a good way to expand um an opener's audience. Like I remember I went to see like MXM Tune in 2021 and her opener was Chloe Moriondo. I don't know if you know her.
Yes.
Yeah, she like started off on YouTube with like the ukulele covers. Um, and because that demographic of fans were all like relatively overlapping, a lot more people started getting more into her and through that tour as well. And I think that's why I'm advocating for like openers. You know, smaller
No,
artists need
I
love
agree.
too.
Openers need love too. Like the most upsetting thing to me is when I see the opener playing and the fans are just not paying attention and they're like
Ugh.
roaming around. That's
right.
my worst.
Especially in the
It's like
first few rows. Like, no, do you
yeah.
know? No
Yeah, but like
respect.
going off of like how important concerts are, I feel like it did hinder a lot of artists like trying to grow and trying to like, literally their source of income. Um, but it also created like this anticipation of like,
Right.
when are they coming next? When are they coming next? Like Taylor
Mhm.
Swift's Love Fest like became Eras tour, and that tour is like the biggest tour to like have ever happened. And I don't think that would have been the case if she did still go on tour when the pandemic was happening. And
Right.
all
Yeah.
these other artists too, like Niall's tour is going so well. Like BTS tour did like they did like maybe 6 shows like when they were able to in the US, and like people were flying from all over the world, and like it built like more anticipation of like like, and they have like new fans that they gained through the pandemic that now want to go see them next, and it like It was just crazy. Like I still think about the effect of Eras Tour. Like that shit was insane. Sorry, I said a bad word.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. But
No,
um
you're so right
there
though.
um there was something else I wanted to say um before we start, wrapping up the pod. Um before we talked about BTS and how like innovative their idea was for like the online for the live stream for the concert. I also wanted to just talk about how artists were kind of forced to be innovative at that point because, TikTok wasn't really what it was at the time. It was very silly, it
Mhm.
was still very casual. It hadn't gotten to like the press level that it is now where everything is very like curated for TikTok. Um, Everyone had to think like, okay, how can I be innovative? How can I stand out? And sorry to anybody who's tired of hearing about Five Sauce, but I'm going to talk about Five Sauce again.
Keep
Um,
talking.
I like at that time they were really like, okay, how can we get everything done that we wanted to get done? The Wildflower music video, for example, is one of my favorite examples because anybody who hasn't seen it, it's very fun, it's very silly, but they've said before they had a huge plan for the Wildflower video because that was the promotional single for the album. And that all had to be scrapped because obviously they weren't able to go into the studio and film an official video because of COVID. So they literally had a green screen that their creative director and music video director was passing between all of their houses,
Yeah.
and they would film their own individual parts in front of the green screen, and then he literally just did his magic and edited together fun, like, they clipped them in together, like obviously we know they're not together in the video, but it just feels fun.
Yeah.
And they really made do with what they had. And then
Yeah.
same thing with talk shows. Talk shows had to think, okay, how are we going to keep going? We can't bring guests in physically to the studio. So artists like Five Sauce again, they're a group of four. They all lived in four different places. They performed Wildflower from their own separate homes, and it was just like a four split screen, but they did it. And
Yeah. It was
artists
just
kind of had to do what they had to do.
it was like so interesting to see too. Like it was fun. It was kind of like
Yeah.
talk shows were kind of like losing their like momentum just because it's like the same content repeated. And then like it gave us new things to watch. Like people would Zoom from their house and you'd kind of just be like, what's there? And
Yeah.
it just like different ways to interact. Like Jimmy Fallon would like come up with games for the artists
Yeah.
to do like online and like you just watch them do it through a screen. And you can kind of tell like it was helpful for people that were like not as comfortable in interviews. It gave the artists that didn't want to go outside like the chance to like, oh, if I can do this interview from home, it like made it easier for them to like put themselves out there without putting them in like uncomfortable situations.
Especially in front of an audience. Like they,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. Like there was so much happening with artists. I feel like everyone started kind of jumping on the bandwagon, like, okay, let's get something going where we can just film it ourselves and post it online. Like Dua Lipa did her studio. Um, I don't know if it's 2054 or 2054, whatever. Like she did her like series of different pieces of her concert performing Future Nostalgia because that tour got canceled. Twice also did something. John Legend did a Instagram concert series called Hashtag Together at Home. Niall Horan did his live at the Royal Albert Hall, where it was literally just an um empty theater, similar to BTS, where he filmed the concert. Melanie Martinez did one. Like so many people were like, okay, let's do this. Because I feel like at that time, especially because there was just so many emotions flying around and everybody was
Yeah.
like honestly, like a lot of people were very depressed, a lot of people were just
Real.
scared. They were like, okay, what's something that we can do that's fun, that's lively, that brings back a sense of normalcy
Hmm.
and like helps us reconnect with these people who have been our fans and also reached a different
Mhm.
broader audiences. um because I feel like ever since then, like music and like fan bases have never been stronger than they are now. I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like it really gave everybody a chance to just like re-submerge themselves into fandom. Like all of
Hmm.
these fandoms, like, Harry Styles, One Direction, they were already big, but they went 10 times bigger than they were before
Hmm.
because people had time and they were like, you know what? Life is short. Let's just have fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's great.
I I think it's because I feel like for me too, like just like in the sense of like a fan, I kind of was like falling off. I was like, I'm too old for this. I'm gonna grow out of it. And then like it gave us with nothing to do. And I feel like music has already been such like a strong connection for people everywhere all the time. And then like just having the pandemic happen and like all of us were relying on something and these artists were finding ways to pivot just made like us like connecting through music an even stronger connection of like we're all going through the same thing. It doesn't matter who you are, like what status you have, how famous you are, we're all stuck inside. And this is how we're going to make do with our time. And it helped people at home and it also helped their careers.
Definitely. I feel like that, I mean, unless anybody has any other little bits that they want to say, I feel like that's a great place to kind of end off. I mean, in general, like I said, and like we've all said, like everything, the music industry is what it is now because of what happened during COVID. And like as unfortunate as everything was, it's been and it's been interesting to see how everything has evolved. And like obviously the music industry is always evolving, but I feel like what everything is now is because of what we had to adapt to. Even like interviews for like the film and TV industry, most of the time they're filmed over Zoom now. And I feel like it's just changed the dynamic of like celebrities and press tours and what all of this is like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is a really good place to end this episode. So this has been another episode of Little Jaded.